Hello everyone. My name is Sanem Sardiji. I'm a principal with the Brattle Group. I've spent the last 15 years of my career advancing and modernizing the retail rate design. And I'm really excited to be moderating today's Scanner and Media panel with two experts who invested similarly many years of their professional lives to the same cause. One of my speakers is Scott Engstrom. He's the Chief Customer Officer with GridX. He has assisted many utilities across the United States with their innovative rate design implementations supported with advanced customer bill analytics. I also have Eva Molnar, who is the Senior Manager of Customer Programs and Services at Southern California Edison. She has overseen Southern California Edison's default time of use deployment and the customer-facing functions involved in the successful deployment. So before I start the Q&A with my panel, I would like to talk a little bit about what we are going to try and accomplish here. First of all, our panel is titled, "Are Customers and Utilities Finally Ready for Modern Rate Structures?" But what do we mean by the modern rate structures, right? So these are essentially rates other than flat volumetric rates or inclining or declining block rates, which have been dominant in our industry for many, many years. When we talk about modern rates or alternative rates, they include many flavors of time varying rates, including time of use rates, critical peak pricing, peak time rebates, real-time pricing, which involve one way or the other, charging customers higher prices during peak periods where the system costs are also higher during those time periods. Or there are other rate structures like three-part rates with demand charges, fixed bills with incentives, and a few other flavors. But for the purpose of today's discussion, we will mostly focus on the time of use rates or time of day rates, as these rates are by far the most commonly implemented alternative/modern rates during the last 5 to 10 years, I should say. So for those of you who've been tracking this space for a while now, limited deployment of smart meters has been suggested as the main barrier against the broader rollout of time varying rates for a long time. However, smart meter deployment is proceeding rapidly in North America. As of 2021, there are approximately 115 million installed smart meters, representing roughly 80% of all US residential customers. However, only 5% of these customers are on time varying rates, again, as of 2021. There's a big gap to bridge there. But the good news is we're witnessing a change in the momentum in the adoption of time varying rates by the utilities. And this is driven by the increasing need for load flexibility and time varying rates being really effective sources of load flexibility. And this prompted many US jurisdictions to consider various strategies for time varying rates deployments, ranging from default deployments, as it was done in Southern California Edison, or testing these rates in limited pilot settings. So regardless of the strategy choice, the first step is almost always the same: selecting the type of the rate design that will be acceptable to customers and also proves to be the most effective in addressing the system needs, such as meeting peak capacity, reducing renewable curtailment, and minimizing overall system costs. If these new rates are not appealing for customers, and if they are not introduced through well-developed marketing and communication channels, the product launch will not be successful. And it may take many more years until a utility may have another shot at getting it right. So this is why we are so fortunate to tune into Scott and Eva today, because they've seen it all and what works the best, what are the mistakes to be avoided. So with further ado, I would like to start to ask my questions to them and learn from their experience for all of us. So let me start with my first question, and maybe Eva, you could get started with this one. There have been many successful pilots of time varying rates, and the findings are widely published. I myself have published quite a bit on the results of these pilot studies. Do you think each utility should do their own pilot before a default time of use or time of day rate rollout?
Yeah, great question. I do actually. I do think that utilities should consider piloting with their customers, and it's not as much that maybe customers aren't ready for time of use, but it's more the operational benefits and the learnings that you as a utility will receive in refining your rollout with customers. So, for example, with Southern California Edison, we did two pilots. We did an opt-in pilot initially, I think in 2016, and then we did a default pilot in 2018. And from those pilots, we learned a lot about how to refine our communications with customers, also refine the cadence of the communications, and then also refine our operational processes and make sure that we were, doing the right things for our customers. And if we didn't have those pilots, I think we would have had a less positive outcome as a result of it. It allowed us to execute, in a much better way than if we didn't have those. So yeah, I would still recommend, even though time of use is more mainstream, I would still recommend, at least for the sake of the utility, to go ahead and do a pilot.
Do you agree, Scott?
Well, can I do yes and no? Yes. Well, first of all, thanks, Sanam, for the introduction. And it's great to be here with you. You have such a great, broad perspective from all your clients that you work with across the country, and know so much about these time of use rates and rate design in general. And then, of course, Eva, you're so deep in having done this, the number of people that have implemented a 5 million customer default time of use program is extremely limited. So you have this really fantastic perspective. So I don't mean to disagree with you. I think and I won't, I'll say I totally sympathize with what you say. I know the systems, as one of the system providers working with Southern California Edison, getting the systems ready and going through those pilots are very important, particularly at the scale you all were working at, that many customers, that much change, so many systems involved. Having the opportunity to run, and you did run some really large scale pilots, larger than some of the smaller utilities out there. If I remember correctly, one of the pilots was maybe 200 to 300,000 customers. So these are not small pilots you were running. They were really true tests of the ability to operate that. I think what may be interesting is for those states and utilities that are looking at opt-in time of use rates, I would question the value in those cases of spending a lot of time on pilots. I think your research, Sanam, and the research that Brattle has done has shown pretty consistently the results of these pilots. They're not showing a wide variety of outcomes. The question I would ask is, what do you gain from doing a 5,000 or 10,000 customer pilot for a year to a year and a half, and then wait for your commission to agree to another opt-in program? Have you gained that much? Your opt-in, progress will probably be small at the beginning. You'll have the opportunity to make the operational changes over time and adjust as your customers opt into the program. So that would be my suggestion for those who don't have to do the default like Eva in Southern California Edison did and take on millions and millions of customers in a very short period of time.
No, great perspective. I think a trend that I'm seeing is that there's a lot of hard data on summer peaking systems and time varying rates, but there's more limited data on winter peaking systems and how the customers in those winter peaking systems react to time varying rates. So there's now more pilot activity in those winter peaking systems to understand the responsiveness better. But the point about doing the pilots for operational experiences is also an important one, because if you're going to make mistakes, you better do those in a small scale and then fix those for a bigger deployment. Great. So I think the next question that I want to ask is just to get to your really big insights immediately. So I would like to ask you the top 3 best practices that increase the success of a default time of day rollout. And I know you have many, but let's just stick with the top 3. And this time let's start with Scott, and now we can go to Eva.
The work we do across a variety of customers, certainly 3 things I think would stick out. One is, certainly go all out on customer education. As most people on this call will be aware, that there certainly are a group of very engaged customers, early adopters who are very familiar with what's going on, but there's a large mass that have a hard time breaking through the noise to let them know that the time of use rate is coming, what that means to them, what the peak hours are. And so we've seen the utilities that really focus on doing that customer education about what is the peak period, what does that mean for their customers' financial impacts. So certainly providing rate comparisons and rate analysis to make customers understand at that level what it's going to mean to them if they're unaware of the environmental benefits they'll be providing. Certainly understanding what it's going to mean to their wallet is very important. And then related to that is just having a customer focus, thinking about this change from the perspective of your customers, and making sure that it's a very good to great experience for them, and using personalization for those utilities that are going down the path of time of use rates. Most likely you have smart meters. You can use that smart meter data to personalize your communications with your customers and recommendations and things like bill impacts and rate comparisons. And then lastly, really understand that there's 3 phases to these time of use rollouts, at least from my perspective. There may be more from others, but there's this sort of pre-default enrollment period where I talked about the importance of customer education. You have to be excellent, by the way, in all 3 of these phases. That transition itself, the part that Eva, I think, was thinking about a lot in terms of the operational perspective. How do I make sure it's easy for my customers when they transition from one bill cycle to the next? Do they receive welcome packets? How do I really make sure that that's a seamless experience, and that the first bills go out accurately to those customers and we don't have those operational issues? So be very excellent in that phase. And then finally, don't forget about the post-enrollment. Now your customers who may not have been paying attention are on this new rate. If you're a summer peaking utility and those high summer bills are coming, be ready to, again, engage with customers, help them through that. Be ready in your call center to help them understand the why this is, and remind them that their shoulder bills maybe were lower, even though their summer bills might be higher, all of those things. So be excellent across those 3 phases.
So there definitely were a lot of things that we've learned along the way. I mean, I think what I'd say as far as best practices are concerned, I kind of mentioned one already with the fact that we took, at Edison, we took what we called a test and learn approach, where we did a smaller rollout up front with customers. And by smaller, yes, Scott, you're right. It was about 400,000 customers that we reached out to. So for some folks, that's larger than their whole utility. But we did kind of a test run with our customers, and that really helped us refine our processes and make sure that we were ready and get reactions from customers as well. The fact that we were testing and all of those things really helped us kind of refine our process. There were many things that we picked up along the way as a result, where we said we could do this better. And so when we did do the full rollout, which was for us, I think 2.6 million customers, and we moved over about 2 million customers, we were able to do that effectively. So I think that's kind of the first thing I would mention. The second thing is the concept of data accuracy, because we are providing rate information to our customers, like their specific rate information. That's something that we want to make sure we're very careful about, and that we're accurate when we do that. And then I think the third thing I would say that was really important for us is getting the communications right from the start. We did send out information to customers, and we made sure that we clearly described what was happening. And we actually sent out multiple communications to customers to make sure that they understood what was going on. And that kind of ties into what Scott was saying too earlier about, like, the pre-communications were really important in, the specific communications and the customer seeing what's going to happen to them, and providing them a way where they could go and learn more if they were interested in that. And all of those things, I think, help to answer, customers' questions and make them feel more comfortable with the transition that was about to happen.
I'm sure you've also witnessed big mistakes, either in your experiences or reviewing other utilities' experiences. So can I ask you the same question the other way around, to identify maybe the top 3 mistakes that one could do in deploying these rates? And maybe we can start with Scott.
Well, certainly our customers, we view they never make any mistakes, but well, I'd say lessons learned. I think one thing, and maybe some of your research proves this out also, Sam, we've worked with a number of utilities now that have had their time of use rates in place for a while, and customers respond. I mean, the dollars and cents, the price signals work. They figure out how to respond or how to deal with that, and in fact, the lesson learned in some cases that customers feel okay about paying higher bills when they know they have some control. When they have choice about when to use energy and they understand that there's some times of the day it's more expensive and other times it's less, then they feel like they're choosing to spend more and they have that control over their bill. So I know a lot of stakeholders worry about making time of use rates the default rate because they feel like customers, there's nothing they can do about it. I think in many cases, well, one of the lessons learned is that customers actually feel the opposite in many customers, that they have more control over their bill now because they can have some control over when they run appliances and everything else. Let's take away the hottest days of the year when most people feel like they don't have control, but taking away those days, I think. So those are lessons learned. I would say, I guess this is maybe somewhat self-serving. I would say the mistakes, as I alluded to in the pilots, is not moving faster or earlier. I think that utilities and stakeholders have found, for the most part, these time of use programs have been quite successful. And the only thing that if they look back, is they say, why did we wait this long? Why did we hold on? And so I would urge stakeholders out there to just lean in and move forward.
Well, I'm gonna represent a little bit of a different thought here. I know, Scott, you're talking about moving quickly, and of course we all want to move quickly for this. I think, for us, I'll share a key learning that we had from the start, which was one of the first kind of test runs we did on sending out information to customers on a really small scale. We actually had a data error that occurred where we recommended the wrong rate for the customer based on their information. And so for us, we, as a result of that, we developed a more formal process where we could do some, we built in some kind of safeguards and double checks in the system to make sure that we would do sample print runs, for example, and double check what the print run had and if it was accurate. And you would be amazed how many errors that you find when you just even look at a small sample and fix that. And so putting some of those processes into place helped us safeguard the accuracy for the larger scale rollout. So for us, that was probably one of the biggest lessons learned, was making sure that we had the operational checks to make sure that the data was accurate, because we are, in this case, providing customers with specific information to help make a decision. So in that case, that was probably one of our big key learnings. We had other, what I would call significant learnings along the way that I think would be, potentially valuable to other utilities. One thing I'll share was we ended up putting Spanish. Being in Southern California, that's obviously, we had a lot of folks who do not speak English, right? And so we wanted to make sure that if you get this letter, you're able to understand it. And we had places where customers could go if they didn't speak English or Spanish to learn more about the transition. But we did end up putting Spanish on the backside for our customers, and that did increase the understanding that our customers had, because we do have such a large Spanish-speaking population. So we did, reach out to our, customers. I'll share just a third one really quick, a recent learning that we've had, and don't know if other utilities are going to experience this, but, initially we had used business reply cards as a way for customers to respond back if they wanted to stay on their current rate. And that was one of a recent learning that we've had, is that our postal system isn't as reliable as it's been in the years past. And we found that we've had trouble with the mail going slower. So it's taking longer for customers to receive the letters that we give them. So we did find that was, another learning of if we were to do this again, actually, we likely wouldn't pursue a channel where customers can provide a reply card through the mail, because it may not get back to us in time.
So with that, another one that I am thinking a lot these days is to how to think about low income and vulnerable customer groups in the context of default time of day rollouts. And with recent changes in the economy and inflation and additional spending on grid modernization and decarbonization targets, the rate pressures are increasing, and these are obviously new rates, and utilities are rightfully nervous about low-income and vulnerable customers. So are the regulators. So, in your opinion, what's the best way to be inclusive and make sure that low-income and vulnerable customers are participating in these rates, but at the same time are not hurt by these rates?
I think it was a really important issue and a really challenging one. I think the advocates at every utility, every state regulatory that are looking out for low-income and disadvantaged communities probably should rightly be concerned about change in rate structure and what that might mean to their constituents. And the good thing is today we have data to make really informed decisions about this. I think the knee-jerk reaction just might be this is going to raise customers' bills, but I think we can use the interval data today to do that analysis to make really well-informed decisions that are based on the data. So I would first just recommend to the stakeholders out there to leverage that investment in smart meters to be able to make really good decisions around who are the most impacted customers. And then think about beyond that, of course, people can make changes, and the challenges for some of the lower income and disadvantaged communities, can you engage with them enough to help them understand that they actually have an opportunity, as I was talking about earlier, just because there is a rate structure that has a peak price that is higher doesn't mean that customers' bills have to go up. It does give those customers, again, some ability to control when they use energy and how much their bills will be. Again, I don't want to sound unsympathetic for the hottest days of the year when none of us feel like we have a lot of control and we want to run our air conditioners at peak periods. And that's certainly a concern to think about. But, we pay our bills all throughout the year. So there's opportunities at other times of the year to have savings. So I would just say, let's be data-driven about how we think about this, and also focus on really helping to educate customers about the opportunities they may have with time of use and time of day rates as well.
So Scott, sounds like you're suggesting that we can turn this into an opportunity to help out low-income and vulnerable customers through better education and better data, better insights, right?
I think we should sure think about it that way. I think if we think about what is the purpose of time of use or time of day rates, it is to reduce the load at those peak periods. And if we just say it's too expensive to reduce the load, then I would say, why are we doing time of use rates? Some of these are hard things to do. It is a challenge for us, but we're doing that because the state legislatures or at the federal level, we've said these are important policies that we're trying to achieve, and rates are the tool to help us do that. So if that's what we're trying to do, is reduce those peaks, let's work really hard to get those customers who may be more impacted than others to understand that there is opportunities for them to benefit from this new structure as well.
So first off, for Edison, we wound up being ordered not to default our low-income customers if they lived in what we call a hotter climate zone. So our territory spans everything from the beach to the desert, right, in Palm Springs. So it's a pretty and mountains, extending northward too. So it's a pretty varied terrain that we have in our territory, and the hotter climate zones we didn't default those customers. The things that I'll say for the customers that we did default, and then also, even the ones that we just proactively reached out to in those hotter climate zones. The first thing that the low-income customers want to understand is, for at least in California, customers are eligible if they're below a certain income level. They get a discount basically on their rates. They have a low-income rate, and they want to make sure that if they do move to time of use, that they don't lose those benefits from being on the low-income rate. So it was really important for us to stress in all of our communications that if you do move to time of use, you're not going to lose that benefit that you have. So that was the first thing, first and foremost. Additionally, for our customers, what we did find is our low-income customers are more price sensitive. So they did really value the rate analyses we shared with them, and they were more likely to switch if they saw that they could save a few dollars going on to time of use. So whereas a lot of our customers who were more high income said, oh, I can save maybe, $5 on time of use a year. That's not, that's nothing in the scheme of things. They weren't as concerned. Low income customers embraced the fact that they could save $5 a year. They need every dollar that they could get. So they actually were really enthusiastic about time of use rates if they had the ability to save. And what we wound up doing instead of defaulting those customers is we did do what we called, acquisition campaigns, where we reached out to those customers and said, hey, you can save. And we did see higher take rates from those customers who were interested in joining time of use to save. And the final thing I'll just say really quickly is that as part of our overall campaign, we did do a lot of what we call community-based outreach. And that was, in addition to us sending letters to customers and emails, and we had a multimedia campaign that went out just talking about the value of saving energy and why that helps our community as a whole. We also made sure that we did more of boots on the ground, and during COVID, it was virtual boots on the ground for a lot of this, but working with more disadvantaged community organizations to make sure that we got the word out. Different folks, like I said, who may not be primarily English speakers, like that's not their native language. We reached out to a lot of groups to make sure that folks who might have any kind of special need or assistance in making a decision, we had organizations to help them through. So it wasn't just an Edison thing, it was a larger effort with the community to make sure that the community was there to assist customers if there were questions. So that, I think, also really added value. We heard a lot of positive feedback from the customers who were participating, who received information from those organizations, that it was helpful for them to better understand time of use.
And I think a related question is, I know that some utilities are thinking about shadow bills or bill protection as ways to protect especially low-income customers, but also all customers initially, as they understand how they should respond to these rates. Like, would you and Scott think about the shadow bills and bill protection? What are the pros and cons, especially for a default rollout?
Oh, sure. I guess I'm a little bit torn on this one. I think I certainly, as I talked about, making a good customer experience is a key to a successful time of use program or time of day program rollout. And certainly offering that sort of price protection or bill protection through shadow billing is one way, I think, to make that experience potentially more pleasant for customers. And I think that's weighed, countered by the fact, as I talked about before, what are we trying to accomplish by doing these time of use rates? We really do want to see customers change their behavior, and if they lack that financial incentive, if they feel like, well, it's I don't really have to change my behavior in the peak period because I'm protected with bill protection, you sort of lose some of that. So my feeling is that probably offering the bill protection is a bit of a security blanket, and customers may forget about that 3 or 6 months into the program anyways. And if they're well educated and they understand the pricing signals, may still make those changes. So maybe on balance it's okay, but I do worry that providing that security also doesn't help us achieve what the policy objectives are of time of day rates.
Yeah, and I'll jump in on this. And, for those who may not be familiar of what is bill protection and, why did we do it? Bill protection was really meant to help give, we didn't use the term risk-free, but it helped serve as a motivator for customers to have the ability to try out time of use. And it maybe, the purpose of it was to belay some fears of potentially having this horrifically large bill and not, being able to pay it. This guaranteed that the customer wasn't going to have to pay more if they were on the time of use rate. And it gives them a chance to try it out, basically, and experiment with the rate. So in that sense, it's positive. And I do know there were definitely customers who went to time of use because of that, right? But I think the thing that you have to weigh here is the cost implications of that, and the reality, and Scott, you kind of alluded to this, that some people may forget. We actually saw over time there was an increase in people understanding it. But at the end of the day, we had about, like when we surveyed our customers, we had about only 22% knew they even had bill protection from that. And the downside is obviously most of our customers haven't been on bill time of use for the full year yet to see bill protection come through. But we're estimating that bill protection is probably going to be almost 40% of our overall budgets for time of use when you look at everything all in, right? Like with the cost of promoting it and whatnot. So it's a huge portion of the spend at the end of the day, because you do have to pay out when many people may not have even realized that they were on it. The majority weren't realizing that they were on it. So I think it's something that utilities really have to think, and commissions have to think strongly about of, is it for the handful of people who did help them, you spent a lot more disproportionate amount of money to support that. And so I'm not sure at the end of the day if that was, of value to the overall effort. Obviously to individual customers it helped, but I personally think that, the project could have been a success without it, and it could have been done at less cost.
Yeah, I know, that's really interesting. I often think about bill protection as training wheels for the customers. But like you said, there are also a lot of additional costs associated with it. And the one that I'm also worried about is if a customer is aware that they're subject to bill protection, then are they going to sit back and relax, just not respond to these rates for the first year of the bill protection? And then all those peak demand savings that we rely on, may not materialize because customers know that they're not going to be harmed by these rates, at least during the first year. Again, lots of pros and cons to be made. All right, so let me just start asking the questions from our audience. Has TOU pricing actually shifted the aggregate residential customer load profile for residential customers? Have customers just absorbed higher peak pricing and not made behavioral changes? So I guess the question is, have you seen any changes in the residential load profile? Also, from an equity perspective, are low-income customers shifting due to TOU costs, and more affluent customers are not? So here, are you seeing any differences in between low-income and non-low-income customer responsiveness?
We have seen load shift from our customers, definitely. We saw, I think it was a point for summer load, which is, for us, our big, that's during our peak season is the summer load. During our peak hours, we saw, I think it was a 0.016 kilowatt hours per customer shift for our 4 to 9 rate. And then with the 4 to 9 p.m. peak. And then we also had a 5 to 8 p.m. peak rate that had higher TOU differentials, right? So now your peak's only 3 hours, but your differentials are higher. And we saw a larger shift with that, which was our was about I think it was 0.019 kilowatt hours per customer during the peak time. So we absolutely saw a shift. And you may think, gosh, that's really small. But, when you add up for 2 million customers, it starts to be, it starts to rank fairly high in the kind of the loading order of needing to have to shift load. So we definitely saw that. And then actually the really exciting news is for our electric vehicle rate, or electrification rate, I should say, for customers who, this wasn't part of our default, but for just our overall, we have, for our residential customers, we have a rate if you have electric vehicle or battery storage or a heat pump for space or water heating, electric heat pump, that is. We saw a tremendously higher amount of load shift, and I unfortunately just don't know that off the top of my head, but it was on magnitudes higher, and that was because customers actually did, when they went on the rate, they started charging their electric vehicle away from those peak times. They're absolutely beneficial. We saw also the more differential you have, the more people are aware and trying to shift. So like that was a positive outcome as well. And then for folks who have equipment where they can shift, that becomes even way stronger load because they're, they have things that are easily shiftable throughout the day. So as we move towards, in California, there's a trend towards electrification. And as we move towards electric vehicles, we're going to continue to see the benefits of our time of use, hours, because customers are clearly following that.
Well, thanks, Eva. And I have another interesting question here from Jim Lazar. Here, Jim is asking, what's the best way to integrate critical peak pricing or critical peak rebates in conjunction with fixed TOU rates to handle extreme periods? And this ties back to another question that was asked, which was, time of use rates are not dynamic. They are static rates. Why are we calling them modern rates? And I just quickly responded and I said they're modern relative to the really antiquated status quo fixed volumetric rates. But obviously there are other more dynamic pricing forms like critical peak pricing and critical peak rebates. So what's the best way to integrate these into something like a default, let's say, TOU rollout?
I'm wondering what Jim means by integrate in this case. If it's I maybe took the question as how do we get customers to participate and add to the benefits of price signals that that a PTR or CPP kind of rate can bring? Because we've certainly seen several of our utility partners who have time of use rates or have done defaults also offer and market these peak time rebate or critical peak pricing rates. And Eva can maybe talk about the success they've had at SCE in customer enrollments and whether customers stayed on those programs after moving to time of use. But if integrate is the word, I've seen that successfully done in terms of offering those rates and making them available to customers before and after a default time of use rollout run has happened. I think the question is how do we market those rates, those programs to customers and get them to behave in a way that's sort of supercharged or time of use on steroids, to use a metaphor? That I think is a really good question. I think we've seen utilities that have been successful with time of use rates leverage their success there and their learnings there to put that into these kind of PTR, CPP type of programs and marketing, and use the same kind of data and rate analysis and rate comparisons to help customers understand that there's even more benefit they have. There's more control. These programs can offer financial benefits to them, and they can further contribute to the sort of policy objectives for those that are interested and care about that.
Yeah, and I'll go ahead and jump in. I mean, for the residential customers, we don't have a heavy critical peak pricing population, but we do have a decent amount of customers who participate in what we call demand response programs, where they're, more, more limited times, throughout the year. And the first thing was we definitely got questions from customers, once again, when we were piloting all this of like, can I still stay on these programs? And the answer was yes. I know for non-residential customers, we made sure to align our critical peak pricing hours with the hours that the TOU hours, right? So you're sending a very clear message to the customer of like, this is when, you need to shift load. I think as we start to get, there's all these grid needs that we'll have in the future that we're going to, I think, be trying to solve for. And that's one of the things that I want to see as we progress. There may be things where there's constraints. Like, for example, if we want to have certain programs where we're sending a message that we really need you to reduce load, let's say in the early morning from 8 to 9, because there's, let's say, a circuit constraint, then that gets a harder message for the customer, because you're telling them, okay, well, my lowest time is this hour, but now there's like a grid constraint during this hour. There's some other thing that's happening away from the peak period. So how is that going to impact my bill if I do this, right? Like, fortunately, so far for California, really the hard part is during those peak hours, right? Like from 4 to 9 p.m. But as we start to rely more and more on these rates that, are more dynamic, you may have situations where they go outside of those peak periods, and then you have conflicts where the customer has to resolve, like, okay, this is not within that peak period, what do I do now? And so I think it might get more complicated as we go forward, and that might be harder for customers to manage. But it's, for right now, they're complementary, and they can continue to be that way, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, no, I think so. Until we get to that prices to devices step, I think the incremental education of the customers, and starting with the TOU rates, and then to the extent that distribution peaks start to diverge from the net system peaks, then targeting customers who can deal with this complexity and at least get them on board might perhaps be a strategy. I'll just ask each of you your very brief concluding remarks. What do you want to leave our audience with based on your experience in trying to modernize the rates and advance the state of rate design for many, many years?
Well, I think, what we're seeing across the industry is a lot of pledges around decarbonization. Of course, we've had renewable portfolio standards for a long time. These are electrification goals, net zero goals, that are really ambitious by utilities. And I think we all have some idea of how we're going to handle that on the supply side between renewable resources that are out there. I think the demand side is going to be a real challenge, and rates are going to be the primary tool. Rates and programs are going to be the primary tool that's going to help utilities achieve what they've talked about in terms of decarbonization and net zero. And certainly time of use rates is probably the, I don't know if this is the right term, the gateway drug. Like we can start with time of use rates, and it's I think a really good option. And I think for those states and utilities and customers that have invested in the utilities, smart meters, you have the data there to understand these programs, to communicate with your customers, to personalize the messages to them about what it means from to their wallets, which will be really important for them to make decisions and to make behavioral changes, then respond to the price signals that are inherent in these time of use rates and other new modern rates. And I just highly encourage utilities, particularly those that have made those kind of pledges and have those policies in the states that they work in, to not be afraid of time of use rates. This can really be a positive, not just for your system and for your environment, but for your customers as well.
From Edison's standpoint, the rollout to time of use rates, I mean, that's, we have in California, we've got the desire to go 100% renewable energy, and TOU for us is a critical part of that, making sure that we're able to have customers shift load away from those peak times allows us to increase our renewable energy and support a lot of those policies that we're heading towards with decarbonization and electrification. So time of use is a critical pin in that, and I think as time goes on, we'll find that there's more dynamic rates too that can potentially help support that pathway. So looking forward to that. But I mean, it's definitely beneficial to do. Our customers appreciate the fact now that there's rate options, and they're accepting of time of use, and once again, it gives them more control and flexibility to move forward. So it's been something that I think has helped our overall path towards that clean energy pathway, and it's a important step for that.
All right, great. Well, Scott, Eva, thank you so much for taking the time and talking about this. This is a really exciting topic for a big majority of the industry right now because of the reasons that you mentioned. Everybody have their eyes on their decarbonization targets and reducing the grid modernization related expenses, and time varying rates and time of use as a starter rate is a really effective tool to get there, one of the tools to get there. So thanks again for sharing your insights and experience with us today. And thanks to our audience here for engaging with us through the Q&A. So this concludes today's panel. Thanks, everyone.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Sanam.